Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on ethical leadership.
Yeah, we're using Eric Hunter's book, The Integrity Edge, as our guide.
Exactly. We've pulled out some key ideas and, practical stuff from the book.
And the goal really is to give you some solid takeaways on leading with integrity.
Things you can actually use, right? No matter what you do.
Absolutely. And Hunter's background really adds something here, I think.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, he's not just coming from like an academic place.
Yeah.
He's a retired U.S. Army first sergeant.
Okay.
And he's worked in public service too. So you get this mix of real-world grit and theoretical thinking.
That's a potent combination for this topic.
It really is. And it's interesting. He dedicates the book to his family. It kind of grounds his whole approach in personal values from the start.
That does say something. Okay, so let's dive in. Chapter 1, The Ethics Awakening. It starts pretty intensely.
It does. He talks about this really formative moment for him overseas.
Right, where he saw a superior make a call that was more about appearances.
Yeah, about optics, rather than what was genuinely best for the people involved.
And that really kind of undermined trust, didn't it?
Completely. And it led him to this, well, this core realization that leadership isn't just about hitting the target. It's how you hit it. He puts it really bluntly. Leadership without ethics is simply organized manipulation.
Wow. That's stark. Organized manipulation.
It is. It really makes you think about the actions you see or take.
And he explores this idea of internal erosion. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. It's this subtle danger,
Yeah.
when you start valuing how things look more than how they are.
Right. Prioritizing the outcome, no matter how you got there.
Exactly. Or choosing convenience over conscience. It's like this slow slide.
That feels very real, like it doesn't happen overnight.
No, not at all. And that leads to his point about integrity and compromise being cumulative.
Meaning each step influences the next one.
Precisely. Every ethical choice you make kind of builds that muscle, makes the next one easier. But the flip side is true too. Every time you rationalize something small,
It makes the next rationalization a bit easier.
you got it. And that's what he calls ethical drift. You gradually move away from your values without maybe even noticing it consciously at first.
So you can't just assume you're ethical. You have to work at it.
Exactly. Hunter really stresses intentionality. Ethical leadership needs constant attention.
You have to actively cultivate it, protect it.
Yes, both in yourself and in the organization. It's not passive.
Okay, that sets a strong foundation. Let's move to Chapter 2, Moral Compass in Motion.
Right. This is about that internal guidance system we all have.
Your values, your principles.
Exactly. What actually guides your behavior as a leader. And he has some interesting thoughts on how to strengthen it.
Like what?
Well, a big one is accountability relationships.
So people who can call you out?
Basically, yeah. But it requires real vulnerability, being open to feedback even when it's uncomfortable.
That's hard for a lot of people, especially leaders.
It is. But it's crucial for staying on track. He also talks a lot about storytelling.
As a way to embed ethics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sharing stories, narratives about ethical challenges, decisions made.
Both the successes and the failures.
Yes, especially the failures sometimes. It makes ethics part of the everyday conversation, part of the culture.
And it's not just individual choices, right? He looks at the bigger picture, too.
He pushes leaders to look at systemic, ethical blind spots.
Like how the company structure or incentives might actually encourage bad behavior?
Precisely. Are your reward systems accidentally pushing people towards unethical shortcuts? You have to examine that.
That requires some real honesty.
It does. Then there's this idea of moral identity.
What does he mean by that?
It's about seeing ethical behavior as like core to who you are, not just a set of rules you follow.
So acting ethically is an expression of your self-identity.
Right. And that, he argues, acts as a buffer against what's called ethical fading, where the ethical parts of a decision just sort of disappear from view.
Okay, I see. And you mentioned storytelling about failure earlier. That sounds risky.
It can feel that way, but it's powerful. When leaders share their own missteps, the lessons learned.
It makes it safer for others to speak up.
Exactly. It fosters that psychological safety. It shows mistakes are learning opportunities, not just things to be hidden.
That connects to his points on ultimate accountability and stewardship, doesn't it?
It does. Ultimate accountability is about feeling responsible beyond just the immediate boss or the quarterly results.
It's like a higher purpose or principle.
Kind of. And stewardship frames leadership not as owning power, but as holding it in trust, temporarily.
For the good of the organization, the people.
Right. You're a caretaker for a period, And the ultimate test of that moral compass.
Let me guess. Legacy.
You got it. Thinking about the long-term impact. Generationally, even.
That really shifts the perspective on day-to-day decisions. Okay. Chapter 3. Culture is contagious.
This one feels intuitive, I think. We all know culture is important.
But how does Hunter define it?
He calls it the invisible ecosystem. It's shaped by what leaders do, and maybe more importantly, what they tolerate.
So it's not just the posters on the wall.
Definitely not. It's the lived reality. And crucially, he says leaders are always shaping culture.
Whether they mean to or not.
Exactly. By design or by default.
And that contagion affect how behavior spreads.
Yeah, think about it. If ethical behavior is modeled and rewarded, people pick up on that.
But the opposite is true, too. Unethical stuff can spread just as fast.
Absolutely. It's infectious. Which is why he warns so strongly against tolerating toxic stars.
Ah, the high performer who breaks all the rules but gets away with it because they deliver results.
Right. And tolerating that sends a terrible message.
That performance matters more than principles.
Precisely. And the damage to morale, to trust, to the real culture, it's huge. Often outweighs any short-term gain.
So culture is built in the small things, the daily patterns.
Absolutely. It's in who gets listened to, how decisions actually get made, how conflict is handled, those everyday moments.
Which can lead back to that ethical drift, if you're not careful.
The gap between what you say you value and what you do just widens over time.
Storytelling comes up again here, too.
Yes, as a way to reinforce the desired culture. Celebrating integrity, celebrating courage, making those the legends.
Transparency is key, too, right? For building trust.
Crucial. Not just sharing info, but being clear about the process. Why was this decision made?
So people trust the reasoning, even if they don't love the outcome.
Exactly. And a really defining moment for culture is how leaders handle ethical violations when they happen.
Do they cover up, or are they transparent and accountable?
Right. That response speaks volumes about what's really valued. Prioritizing transparency, accountability, and repair is vital.
He also talks about developing ethical leaders and using recognition strategically.
Yeah, you can't just hope for ethical culture. You have to build it. That means training that focuses on character, not just skills.
And making sure recognition programs reward the right things.
Definitely. Celebrate integrity, collaboration, ethical actions, not just hitting the numbers. What gets rewarded gets repeated.
I liked his point about leaders modeling ethical reasoning out loud.
Yeah, sort of narrating their thought process.
Showing how they weigh the ethical dimensions of a decision.
It makes it less mysterious, right?
Yeah.
And it invites others into that process. It shows it's okay not to have the answer immediately.
And this focus on culture needs to be even stronger during change or crisis.
Absolutely. That's when the pressure to cut corners is highest. Ethical compromises made then can really poison the well long term.
Okay, makes sense. Chapter 4, the temptation trap. This feels universal.
It is. We all face pressures, right?
Yeah.
Ambition, crisis, just plain convenience. They can all lead to compromise.
So how do you resist? What's the anchor?
Hunter points to purpose, a clear sense of why you're doing what you're doing.
Provides stability when things get tough.
Exactly. It helps you navigate those pressures without losing your bearings. He also talks about inner congruence.
Aligning your actions with your values.
That internal consistency. When there's a mismatch, you're much more vulnerable to temptation. Living in alignment strengthens your core.
And you don't have to do it alone. Community matters here, too.
Big time. Having trusted people, mentors, peers you can talk to, get advice from, who hold you accountable, that's invaluable.
He contrasts reflection with rationalization.
Yeah, that's a key distinction. Reflection is genuinely thinking through the ethics.
Whereas rationalization is just finding excuses for what you want to do anyway.
Exactly. We're all good at rationalizing. Taking that pause to reflect breaks the cycle.
And finally, he talks about grace.
Grace for yourself and for others when mistakes happen, because they will.
Focusing on learning, recovery, not just blame.
Right. It acknowledges we're human. Perfection isn't the goal. How you respond to failure is key.
That fosters growth, not fear. Okay, chapter 5, the cost of silence.
Yeah, this is about what happens when people don't speak up about ethical concerns.
And the danger is
That the unethical behavior just continues, right? It grows. And trust completely erodes.
Why do people stay silent? He outlines a few reasons.
Fear is a big one. Fear of retaliation, of damaging your career.
Or just feeling like it won't make a difference anyway.
Exactly. Or sometimes, sadly, the bad behavior just becomes normalized. That's just how things are here.
Those are powerful forces keeping people quiet.
They are, which is why the responsibility falls squarely on leaders to break that cycle.
To create an environment where it feels safe to raise concerns?
Absolutely. Psychological safety again. People need to believe they'll be heard fairly, not punished.
And fair accountability is part of that, knowing that integrity rules do apply.
Yes. Accountability reinforces that ethical standards aren't optional. Seeing issues addressed fairly encourages others to speak up.
Storytelling again, as a way to encourage speaking up.
Celebrating people who did challenge the status quo ethically.
Makes it seem less like a risk and more like an act of leadership.
Precisely. It reframes it. And he makes this really interesting point, that in a really strong ethical culture, silence about wrongdoing actually starts to feel uncomfortable.
Like the norm is to speak up, so being silent feels wrong.
Exactly. It's a sign the culture has really taken root.
Fascinating. Okay, chapter 6, Justice in the Workplace. This feels very relevant today.
Extremely. And Hunter defines it broadly. Fairness, equity, dignity, accountability in the systems.
And it's not just about following the law.
No, he frames it as a moral imperative for leaders, something you have to actively pursue.
And leaders set the tone, right? Through policies, but also just daily behavior.
Absolutely. How people are hired, promoted, treated day to day, those actions speak loudest. Perceived unfairness is toxic.
He mentions that injustice can be silent. What does that mean?
It's not always obvious discrimination. It can be patterns, right? Certain people consistently overlooked, voices ignored.
Subtle biases, systemic issues.
Exactly. Things that build up over time. Leaders need to be attuned to those quieter forms of injustice.
So it requires being proactive, not just waiting for complaints.
Right. Actively looking for ways to make systems more equitable. It's an ongoing effort, not a one-time fix.
And really examining those underlying structures and norms.
Asking tough questions. Are there biases baked into our processes? Who benefits? Who's left out?
That takes courage.
It does. And he frames it helpfully, I think. It's about responsibility for building a better future, not getting bogged down in blame for the past.
That's a constructive approach. Transparency comes up again for justice, too.
Yes, especially around decision-making criteria, hiring, promotions, evaluations.
Okay.
If the process is clear and understandable, it builds trust.
Reduces the perception of bias or favoritism.
Right. And things like equitable access to opportunities, fair discipline, pay equity, these are foundational.
But critical pieces.
And he challenges the idea that diversity and merit are somehow opposed.
How so?
He argues they reinforce each other.
Yeah.
By tackling bias and being truly inclusive, you access a wider talent pool, you get better ideas, better outcomes.
That makes sense. It's not a zero-sum game.
Not at all. Yeah. Leaders constantly have to balance individual needs with the collective good. That's part of navigating justice ethically.
Finding fair solutions when interests compete.
Exactly. And the main takeaway here is that pursuing justice is a journey. Continuous learning, listening, adapting.
You never fully arrive. Okay, chapter 7, Ethical Leadership Under Fire. Crises happen.
They do. And Hunter says crisis is when true character is revealed. Easy to be ethical when things are calm.
But adversity is the real test.
And the first instinct in crisis is often secrecy, right? Control the message.
Yeah, damage control mode.
But ethical leaders resist that. They choose transparency, even when it's hard.
Because trust is paramount, especially then.
Exactly. He also talks about swift, principled action, balancing being careful with being decisive.
Acting from your core values when making those tough calls.
Right, and being visible. Leaders need to be present, communicate care, show commitment during a crisis.
People need that reassurance.
They do. And resilience is key for the leader, obviously, fueled by purpose, community, those core values.
It's not a solo act, though, leading through crisis.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
You need those support networks, courageous teams who will also act with integrity.
People willing to speak truth to power, even under pressure.
And you can't wait for the crisis to prepare. You need to invest in ethical leadership development before the fire starts.
Build that capacity proactively.
Exactly. Ultimately, lighting ethically under fire is about staying true to your values and the people you serve.
Fidelity. Okay, chapter 8 tackles profit and principles. The age-old question.
Yeah, are they in conflict? Hunter argues strongly that's a false dichotomy.
He thinks ethics actually helps the bottom line.
In the long run, yes. Ethical cultures attract and keep good people.
Right. People want to work for companies they respect.
And they build customer loyalty. Trust becomes a real competitive advantage.
That makes sense. Plus, fewer scandals, fewer legal issues.
Exactly. Principled leadership reduces risk, improves efficiency, It's not just nice to have, it's smart business.
He even talks about ethical experimentation. What's that?
Encouraging innovation, but within that ethical framework. Yeah. Finding creative solutions that align with your values.
And being transparent when there are tensions between profit and principles.
Yeah, acknowledging the trade-offs, explaining the reasoning, not pretending it's always easy.
And over time, this alignment transforms the company's identity.
Right. You build a brand based on trustworthiness. That's powerful.
It connects back to that idea of stewardship, managing resources responsibly.
Mm-hmm. Balancing financial goals with ethical duties to everyone involved, employees, customers, community.
So ethical leadership ultimately boosts engagement and loyalty.
That's the argument. It creates this positive cycle. Engaged employees, loyal customers. It feeds both ethical conduct and financial health.
Okay, Chapter 9 gets practical. Building ethical teams.
Yeah, moving from culture to the actual team level. And again, intentionality is key.
Starting with hiring. Looking beyond just skills.
Right. Prioritizing character. Do their values align? How do they reason through ethical problems?
And actively working against unconscious bias in that process.
Crucial to make sure you're building diverse teams based on merit and values, not just who feels familiar.
Then comes onboarding, making ethics part of day one.
Exactly. Not just paperwork, but really immersing new people in the values, the expectations.
And the most powerful tool is probably leaders modeling the behavior themselves.
Always. Actions speak loudest. Walk the talk.
Creating psychological safety within the team is vital too.
Yes. So people feel safe, raising concerns, asking questions, making mistakes without fear.
We keep coming back to that. And using recognition to reinforce the right behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Celebrating ethical conduct, integrity, teamwork shown, that's what's truly valued.
And lastly, creating space for ongoing ethical learning.
Yeah, discussing dilemmas, learning together. Ethics isn't static. Teams need to keep developing that muscle.
Okay, that brings us to the final chapter, Chapter 10, the legacy you leave.
A powerful way to wrap things up. Hunter's point is simple. Every leader leaves a legacy.
Whether you intend to or not.
Exactly. It's built day by day, in every decision, in the consistency between your words and actions.
So you need clarity of purpose first. What impact do you want to have?
Right. What do you want to be remembered for? How do you want to have affected people?
And a big part of legacy is developing others.
Huge. Mentoring, developing the next generation of ethical leaders ensures your values continue.
And embedding those values into the system so they outlast you.
Mm-hmm. Institutionalizing ethical standards, making it part of the organizational DNA.
Building networks based on integrity helps too. Communities of practice.
Definitely. Reinforces standards, provides support. Ethical leadership isn't done in isolation.
Even how you leave a role shapes your legacy.
Yeah, transitioning with grace, with humility. That final impression matters.
But the deepest legacy might be intangible, like cultures of trust.
I think so. Those shifts in how people interact, the psychological safety, the open dialogue that's profound.
And that legacy can ripple outwards, beyond the organization.
Right. Influencing industries, communities, setting a higher standard.
Because ethical leaders see themselves as custodians of influence, not owners.
Exactly. It's a temporary trust. And focusing on that ethical legacy brings a deeper fulfillment.
More than just hitting targets.
Much more. But it takes courage, right? Inner strength.
Standing firm on principles isn't always easy.
Not at all. It means treating leadership as a daily practice of character building.
Constantly working on being the leader you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that the example you set inspires others, ripples forward.
So pulling it all together from the integrity edge, the main takeaway is
that integrity isn't a burden. It's actually an advantage. It's the edge.
It builds trust, loyalty, resilience, sustainable success.
Exactly. It's the foundation.
Well, we really hope this deep dive gives you something to think about, maybe inspires you to make those ethical choices, starting now in whatever role you're in.
Yeah, think about how you can help build ethical teams, maybe mentor someone else on this path.
And we'll leave you with this question to mull over. What kind of legacy are you choosing to build? And maybe more importantly, what's one small step you can take today towards that vision?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.